Good afternoon. This is April 21st. This is one of my very first training videos to work with my colleagues and to work with some of my young friends who are nurses, who are counselors here in the US and also in Brazil. In what I'm trying to do is frame by frame, I have a total 40 images that I have created. I'm starting on this very first main themes called the psychology of round and square. This is a 50 years of my past academic training when I received my master's degree and this 3C system was created. But from a cross-cultural life experience, since 1962, my family and I have moved from Macau, the Portuguese colony on the side of China, to Brazil, and Brazil to the US, and now back to in the last 40 years, both in business. We left academia in about 77 and starting our business with the gemstones of minerals. But in the meantime, I have never abandoned what I have created in 1974 to 76, this particular 3C system. But moving forward and a little bit backward, in that time when I developed this counseling interactive system with my students, with my other counselees who used my service, in the very front, subconsciously, now eventually we can call even Gustavo Jung about the collective unconscious, how I have directed my system in the use of the many cultural spheres in the shape of round, in the shape of square, and in the shape of triangle. While in actuality, to talk about psychology of round and square, the triangle comes out from the square. Okay, half a square, you'll get two triangles. It can represent a little bit negative. And yet, in this presentation, in what I have designed, my logo will be with me for the longest time. A little bit of my gratitude, my thankfulness to Brazil. In this logo, you can see the blue square, the green round, and the yellow triangle. One very interesting expression from my Brazilians, very loving fellow Brazilians and friends. When we say everything is happy, he said tudo azul, everything is blue, right? Azul. The green and yellow you can see in the Brazilian flag. And if you want to go a little bit more historically, there's two interpretations. The green is basically the Brazilians' Amazon, the jungle, the green, the huge green spheres of Brazil. The triangle is one of the most vivid Brazilian color flower tree, a color tree called Ipe, I-P-E. And in my youth, I've seen all these wonderful colors. So by creating this logo representing the three spheres, even as a triangle shape, a square shape, but I call it sphere because they're all the spheres of influence. And also, if you can round it up your triangle, meaning you can always bring it back to the round in the natural self. But there were times harsh words were exchanged, so that is triangle. And the square is part of the transitioning round to square, half the square turning is become triangle. So I want to start this training program from this logo, and then we're going to move on to the next click on. Okay, here we go. I have my partner assistant Gustavo's in Brazil at this point, giving me a little bit of guidance on this presentation. Here is the 3C communication counseling system, which was developed in 1974 when I was receiving my master's degree at University of Wisconsin at Platteville, where also I got my bachelor's in 1972. And between 1974, getting my degree, and 75, 76, less than 3 years when I was as a counseling psychologist at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee City. But in between this time and period, the three spheres that you see from the left, you can see the communication dynamics. The first C is dynamic CD. The second C is the communication analytica, which basically I was aiding my student to learn about this dynamics, which derive from, I adopted from the transactional analysis of Eric Burns. At that time, he was in Carmel, California. In the using his, again, the multiple 6 round of spheres, I have brought this into more of a visual and turned all the static spheres into a more dynamic way in the way I use it. And you will see from the following designs and how that evolved. And that evolution is part of my change from the Freudian psychology to the educational psychology to the communication psychology and also cross-cultural psychology. Okay. But every day, as we are sharing now, I want to providing a sphere that is you're receptive to what I say and make sure my points are crossing over clear to you. If not, there's always the future interaction. This is the second recording and taping of this lecture. And from here onward, I will be scheduling fixed schedules on demand and also allow our audience to participate, to share. But as you can see, the first C in red is the communication dynamics. The second C, communication analytica, you can see already the presence of the round, square, and the triangle. This is where I help my students to do analysis together, jointly, in the cultural sphere of our room and the bigger cultural sphere of the university, and also another tier of the sphere is the town we're in. So we can use the spheres very eloquently, very comfortably. There's no mistake. Where are we at? Are we in round? Are we in a quasi, maybe square? In all those shapes and the color intensity, take your pick, take your choose. Okay, this is in a way, by me paying my respect to Brazil, going back to the first image, is because I'm extremely grateful that I am being able to continue using graphics and designs to continue the major emphasis that I am in touch with the West and the East, building this bridge of communication and understanding, because I am not only inspired by the Brazilian people and by the language use of the Portuguese, but also very dearly, I am very much inspired and motivated by Paulo Freire. I understand in the political sphere, I've heard many negatives or dislike about Paulo Freire, more or less when the politics are engaged into demonizing, destroying your opponents, where we forgot to be kind. But anyway, this is how I started my adaptation from the TA model of the transactional analysis to have created my sets of communication skills and game that we can play, very easy to play, very easy to learn, of the 3C communication counseling system. As you can see, the round and square and the triangle, the spheres, the cultural spheres, have also been developed at that time. Very quickly, there's a little mistake here. Cultural sphere 3. Well, I meant to be the screen is 3, a little error, no big deal. But again, showing doing as much repeating as I can. Communication dynamics, cultural spheres, communication analyticus. Once again, repeating, emphasizing the square and round, but you can see to the bottom, to the right corner, the entity we are under, CCI, Cross Cultural Institute, in itself is just showing the round and a square. And then, as I said before, Gustavo Jung's collective unconscious brought me back to why I was developing the counseling system. The psychology of round and square came back to me. That's very intuitively, that's very instinctively, that's how the Chinese culture begins in a way. Because round is the air, the sphere, the sky, unlimited. And the square is the earth line. You can see the ocean line, you can see the land lines. Just a visual effect versus what is out there. One more time on this development of the three C's. I put the cultural spheres in gold and the approximation. So the cultural sphere now is moving in the back, and let these two elements to interplay. First is just listening skills, hearing, listening, asking questions, and the analytica is the student and me and the counselee and I analyzing what we have said. Today with the videos, today with the all the technology that we're using now, it'll be much easier, and line by line, transaction by transaction, the communication analytica can give all of you the metrics. You can actually rate and modify. Your behavior will change because after your analysis of yourself, even as me, as a counselor, as a facilitator, teacher, or as a therapist, or as a psychologist, the format works for. Here, number 3, this is my adaptation from the transactional analysis, which they had adopted those dynamics from the Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, defining his superego. Ego in Latin is me, in Greek, I'm sorry. ID is meaning representing the biological of personal drives. So again, I put the cultural sphere into a gray line to let you see the transaction, how they were transforming of this one set of theory from Sigmund Freud to the transactional analysis of Eric Burns in California, and then I readapted with the rest of my psychological, cultural, and cross-cultural experience, plus my languages that have allowed me to form this system under the cross-cultural psychology sphere and the cross-cultural life experience. One more time, repeat is good. Repeat with images. This is the bigger Freudian psychoanalysis, superego, ego, and in it, and then the transactional analysis, replacing it by parent, adult, and child. And remember, the two sets of greens, meaning it's a dialogue, it's not a monologue. Okay. This is I have added what I call altered egos, or altera in Portuguese that we speak, altera. It also means alternative egos, because in the superego, that's what the cultural side of us, and many times the young people developing their ego, by the cultural side. Here you have the Monkey King in the picture from the far left on top. You have Hercules to the right, the Greek hero in the Homer's Iliad, Odyssey, and the storytelling. And then you have good old Western in the left. You have the pirates to the far right, and the superheroes of the present time. Often that we have less of a direct linkage. We see it, but we don't know it as well as what they do. In my personal life, in this past 50 plus years living here in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, I became a very dear friend to Gary Gygax, who produced the Dungeons and Dragons. And then together we have developed game and also movie with Hollywood, at that time with Lorimar, actually even a card game called the Gem Explorer. Well, unfortunately, he went through a little bit of rough time. Some of his hostile takeover had taken over those names and terms. Well, that was almost 30 years ago. I mean, those licensing is over. But here I'm using to let my participants, learners, and users to see in the each of this super ego, id, you can see how much time Freud has spent his time practicing his theory into his psychoanalysis by again cross-cultural, by borrowing the value system of the Greeks. His Oedipus complex, even electric complex, have often coming from the culture from the Greeks. Again, remember, in what I'm developing, I'm not trying to make the importance of the counseling or therapy techniques of the 3C counseling system. The 3Cs in what I am speaking is become a part of your own culture. I come into this program developed because we can no longer afford the number of the people in need of counseling and guidance. From day one, I loved my master program when it was called Counseling and Guidance. We do not need a lot of counseling. Sometimes we have to recognize the quality amongst people, and we can help them articulate what is in them, the human potential, the human goodness, the human kindness, and all the other elements. Often these talents get suppressed because you have been told you're not worth it, you're no good, you're dumb, you're stupid. Every word makes an impact, makes a dynamic that can be positive, negative. So we have to learn in our culture. Just look at the system of the demand of counselors needed here in the state of Wisconsin and in Illinois. They're inundated. They need counselors. So in what I'm hoping is to make this set of value become a cultural norm, that peer counseling, one-on-one, two-on-one, group counseling, we all can provide some sort of advice and counseling, but with some psychological awareness of psychology, coming back from Sigmund Freud, but there are Rollo May, there are names like Maslow, Abraham Maslow, we talk about Eric Fromm. In the field of psychology in the last 50 years, there have been so many development, except very little about the Asian side and the Chinese side of the counseling culture. That's why psychology of round and square can be of interesting for those who can say, well, I care to expand. What is round and square with the Chinese? And I hope I will provide you part of that orientation guidance. You will show up in here. Another repeat about the super ego, and it from the Sigmund Freud. And it's very difficult to talk about dynamics when you have looking one-dimensional, not in a mobile, which is very much possible in the coming weeks and months, because now we're into the IT plus AI's ambience, the cultural sphere ambience. Now we talk about, entertaining the input with space web, which coming. But I'm trying to show as much as I can around in our Brazil, when we see each other, good friends, we don't shake hands. Yes, gently shake hands, we embrace, we hug, we tug. Well, I'm just emphasizing it's not that we hug and tug here in the US as well. Round general meaning that we're friendly. Abraços, giving hand, the Roman hands giving, I'm offering my hand because I'm offering my hands of handling weapon. Okay. The cowboys sit in horseback distance, so it comes in American big high. So that's another symbol of round. And the square, you can search for symbolism, what they meant. And square sometimes a little pause, you know. Body language, when we talk about just exaggerating about waving, hello, hi, embracing, and then squares like indirectly, I'm blocking off that extension. Some people are very easy to be touched and returning shaking hand. Others a little bit hold back. That's all the pause status. As you can see in the triangle, yes, I've been making more direct, hostile, less friendly, aggressive, close. And down below here on the green ground sphere is emerging out. So these are figures in transitions. Okay, square and the triangle. And my method, in a way, is to try to repeat as much as the images, the data that I'm use, the image that I use, repeating it so I can have alternative forms to grasp. And someday you may also have more your part of the expression. Now here, I'm just trying to show the complementary round and round. As you can see, is the Asian way, or just so is everywhere, the teacher and the student. And down below is the couple, a man and women, the complementary rounds versus the master, the teacher, the coach, the trainer, okay, or the grandfather. Round and round, but with different sizes of aging and maturity. And the oval sphere in the back, basically, we're talking about overall, we're all in a round atmosphere. Okay, this is the cultural sphere. Then we're moving on to another change of color. I just want to show you the layer of the complementary, but there's size, but there's the collective good sphere. If I'm a teacher, I want to make my playground, I want to make my team playing in a very positive environment. Okay. And then the other purple and red is all depending how you use it. Now, our mood can change. We are all playing tennis, all of a sudden rain came, right? Not against each other. There was, oh, geez, now what happened? The layers of spheres you can put in anywhere. You can create 5, 6, 7 different spheres. A phone come in telling you some good news, bad news can affect your playing performance in any sports. But I will go on that to be more elaborate in the different frames. Okay. Here, maybe I am Asian, I'm Chinese. I've been using a lot of the teaching, the jiu-jitsu, judo teaching, and whatnot. Here I'm using the Confucian history. But remember, when you are going to develop with me, you're not going to listen to a boring lecture 24/7. You can develop this kind of a configuration in the use in Google. It's just about caricature, okay? You can poke fun of your president, you can make fun of somebody else, or you can make remarks. Today, the available of data, I look at this as all data. You can create the kind of language you can relate it to your audience, the age of your audience. Maybe you can use animals, cartoons. How many stories we talk about the sympathy and empathy of Bambi? How many stories we can tell again with today's youngsters, the many movies they watch that evoke feelings, sentiments different than our period and our time. Okay? A little bit emphasize of the square. This young lady on the left, starting in a smiley day and then putting her, well, I am not very sure. So she is transiting to a square. I purposely making the square turn, maybe indicating she's going to next. If I put it to the in between these two panel, you can tell the story that we are going into a meeting. I'm not sure what I'm doing. You can use your term and define. And now we are here in the groups. Okay. The square are different. The square is non-directional, and this twisted square is directional that can turn into triangle or can go back to a round like here. So in every presence of the cultural sphere of any time and moment, there are changes. Remember, dynamic is always dynamic. You cannot anticipate what can change. One more time, using the same configuration, but I added the transitory transfiguration. Here I'm misspelling here, but I am adapting something that we have done this a year and a half ago, and then this configuration here was done 4.5 years ago during COVID. But still showing round, square, the data before they go into a solid situation. Maybe the meeting we got into solid, but here is one of the many options, because I'm not giving you methodology. I'm giving you a general framework, and you can interpret in any one of your own language, your culture, your tribal culture, if you're a surfer. My daughters are in Cannon Beach and in Oregon. They have their surf group, they have their culture, they have the rituals. We have so many cultures. Then you would recognize, I think this recognition of cultures will eventually end up helping us to become better members in our community. And with this skill we're learning, we become better into other outer community beyond our own. Again, this is a repeat. Here shows a lot of what am I doing next? Puzzling. Okay. Now this girl is, I put her around, I can make her look like I'm good. But now she said, well, I'm getting ready. Why the other one can say, well, we're very positive. Maybe they know more about the content, about the meeting, the theme of the meeting. This too is a little bit uncertain, but don't put anything negative. There's just a way to show, because that can change in split seconds. If those two hand them a little donut, a cup of coffee, bingo, that goes around. Again, you have the twisted square, and the green, and then the oval round behind. Dynamics are just dynamics. You can change anytime, any moment. Here we go. This is the mode, the oval, the round, and the long square, and then twisting square. You set the mode, you interpret, you trying to read your people. You don't analyze, you're trying to read. If you're a good leader, you will uplift somebody showing the body language or hesitation, not very sure. You want to facilitate to make your participants to play. As a coach, how to motivate the 11 players to play. By second half, they're 9, 10 years old. They're tired. They're drained. They're looking forward to the next drink, the hamburger, the meal, instead of running on the long grass on the big field. There are many, many ways you can read about your players, your participants, and how to help them motivated to continue on in that particular game that sets up goals and objectives. These are all about leadership training, and everybody can use in 3 shapes to give you a definition. And don't forget, I always use a collective shape, okay? And that can change. Don't get me wrong, that can change. A rainstorm can make all the players a little bit depressed when the grass becomes slippery. We have a tight score, 1-1. We're not sure we're going to win. All this puts anxiety, and anxiety is what is the nervous causing agent to many of us. In different scales, have different kind of manifestations, can cause different kind of effects. And here we go. The guy scratching his head. I'm sure know what I'm doing. This one I say, what's going on? But I always think in the good nature in us, behind us, we always have that round sphere in us. Okay. That is why my logo, do azul, is always blue. The sky is blue. Here comes the couple fighting, arguing. They're not talking. You don't need any verbalization. You can see the image. But I put the little round behind them because I hope they will get back to their own good senses. Okay. This one picture here on the older couple. In fact, the lady one time had a piece of wood. I modified that. And this is the I give you a little bit in this short video about the round and square using here as a scale. And this of the Chinese yin and yang, where there is yang, that means this is light, have a dark spot. And the dark spot here, the black, you have a light spot. There's everything about the movement. You can see that it's about Tai Chi, okay? And this is how Chinese write about number, the center. It's a square, and then almost like a compass kind of a line. But in actuality, in the old days, this is no square, it's just round. So now many of us in calligraphy, in writing in Chinese expression, many using the heart character in the middle. And the heart also means, you put this word, zhong xing, Chinese. This is the word put together at the center. Minor graphical error here, the 11 belong to. And another design that shows the sky and the top, the same symbolize sky, and this is earth. Okay, just one more images. This is the Tai Chi. So all those who play Tai Chi, you look at their movements, they have an image for the older master taught. Paul, you're always holding the universe with you. So all your movements basically talk about not to drop the ball. But in every movement that you create, you're trying to encounter or meet up the other opponent's movement, be that your elbow can block, your hand can fight, and your knee and your shoulder, your head. All this martial arts, Tai Chi is the root movement for most of the Chinese and Asian martial arts. Okay. And this is how Tai Chi evolves into the Chinese hexagon. Okay. And the hexagon, well, I know I have not give permission. I did not allow the youngsters to listen to this video, but there's nothing wrong about it. If you make it very simple, the Chinese have the saying, one from the number one born out of number two. And between number one and number two, they created eternal elements. And take a look at the symbolism in the Chinese called Ba Gua. Ba means 8 sides. Okay, Gua is kind of the justling, is a kind of the shamanistic reading. But the Ba Gua, this 8 grams, is all made up of one single bar, and the 2 open bar also talk about 2. So you think about this genetically, the 1 bar can symbolize the male organ, the genitalia. The 2 bars meaning the female. 1 and 2 produce 3 and 4. It doesn't matter what species, doesn't matter what animal. This is the basic. In a way, I becoming very appreciated of the Chinese interpretation versus the Freudian fixations from oral, anal, genital. what I'm trying to say, we have to open our mind to learn and earn. Okay. I'm not pushing, I'm not trying to insinuating the Chinese have a better understanding. The only thing I'm saying, do not forget, I'm also cross-cultural. I'm more West than I am East based on my age. I left Hong Kong, left China, born in China, and then stayed there until 5. And 52 moved to Macau, and 52 to 62, I was just about barely teenager, moved to Brazil. So my education with the Chinese is coming in bits and pieces. Just like here, we talk about bits and pieces of a culture. But because all these bits and pieces and my love for the cultural anthropology and my 5 languages, thanks to my early exposure in Latin and the singing Greek, nobody really learned Greek other than serving Mass in the Roman Catholic school system and baptized as a Roman Catholic. The singing of the Latin in Gregorian tones, pero mio secula seculorum. I will explain the other features. The sound carry you to speak and to pronounce your Latin words and vowels a lot more articulate. Just a little bit of an idea. In the famous books and scriptures of Confucius, they call it 4 books, 5 scriptures. In actuality, there were 4 books and 6 scriptures. The 6 scriptures meaning music. And music has become a huge void. But other than music, Chinese also have very strongly emphasis of poems and rhymes. Okay. But instead, look at the Gregorian chant starting almost 200 years or less since the birth of Christ. And the Gregorian chant, you can still listen to all these chants in the many churches. That's just another cultural observation about languages, cultures, sound, and music. Here is the one more emphasis of the sky is round, the earth is square. And that is my logo, CCI, Cross Cultural Institute. Maybe early on, I already had thought about this balance. When the empire doing well, they rule well, like the Zhou dynasty, who had ruled their dynasty for 800 years. This is where the Zhou dynasty had granted Confucius to develop. All his writing is to be harmonious to all the codes of relationship, interpersonal relationship by the first emperor of the Zhou dynasty called Zhou Gong, or the grandfather or Gong Gong of Zhou. And I will continue to emphasize this because the Zhou rulers came from an earlier dynasty called Shang, which you will know more about the oracle bones. You know about Shang is also one of the earliest dynasty who very strongly engaged in commerce, and they had traversed in the very broad area of China, and one of the queens supposedly blocked off the invasion of the invaders coming from the west. Those were the quote unquote the tribe escaped me, but it's basically the Aryan race in the India, Pakistan, and Iranian, that region, the Caucasus region, coming into China. It was blocked and defeated by one of this lady queen from the Shang dynasty. But unfortunately, this is one of the latest news by the Chinese discovery through anthropology and through archaeology. The dynasty who was the ruler over the Zhous turned the Zhou people become a slave capturers. And in that process, remember, Shang dynasty also lasted 450 years. And in a way, it gives you the indication in a certain dynasty, certain period of time, when you are governed by some of the misgiving of the rulers, the kings, the Shang rulers, we have just discovered in the last 15, 20 years, they practice both cannibalism and human sacrifices. And this is why you talk about a very, very maybe bloody, I had even hypothesized the migration of the Shang when they got defeated. The Shang people had emigrated not in a fear of Bering Straits, but from the Shang going to a shallow sea, they could have emigrated to Mesoamerica because the ocean flow over Japan will flow over to the Oregon coast all the way down to Mexico. Again, this is part of my entertaining myself that caused me to do more research. And that's where the Aztec, the Mayan, the Olmec, okay, with the human sacrifices. But in general, even in our part of Brazil, Tupinambá, in the coast, there were practice of human sacrifice, as many of you have seen probably movies, on about the Mayans, and so. But what Confucius and the Zhou dynasty had evolved away from such a cruel practices, had developed the finest moral code, one of the finest human value compass that have give us more than 3,000 years of the order generated by the teaching of Confucius. That will be another subject matter. This the Chinese character of heart, from the oracle bones, from the pictorial graphics before. This is how the heart chamber develops, and now we just have to call the 3-part of the heart. For those who like food, dim sum. This is dim sum in Cantonese. In the Mandarin, 普通话, they pronounce this xin, X-I-N. But in Cantonese, this is called sum, okay? Almost like S-U-M. This is how the character evolving from the character of heart. And also I'll put a little bit of the xin, heart, and Eric, the character written by loyalty, thinking, see, the heart in the bottom, and the forgiveness. The first character on top means equal. The bottom is heart. Again, here is called rest, is self on top, heart in the bottom. Just giving the psychology of round and square will be more and more evolving and engaged. And basically, the psychology of round and square will soon become recognized in China. It's another form of a study. But unlike the Western psychology, often start with the Freudian psychosexual dynamics, China in itself can fulfill all the study about psychology, and this will be one of the cross points that we can cross over and then find it at ease. Another way to look at the heart is written. This is sad. Bei in Chinese is the heart on top, as it means no. The heart is not happy. The character of love is the two other part. We don't call it prefix, suffix. In this case, the heart can be the radical, the prefix can be on top, and the suffix can be in the bottom. But you remove the heart. This is the word receiving, okay? This is to think. On top of it looks like a rice field, like square, right? Think, repeat, duplicating. And this in the middle, sad, is the autumn season riding on top of the heart. So my wife and I enjoy our fall season. I think it's one of the most colorful. It's where the color of the trees going back to the real color, and it's saying goodbye and waiting for another season. So this is the sadness. And then this one, forgive, is on top. The character means equal, and the bottom of the heart is the pi character. This is a repeat. I mean, sometimes I just liking the style of the writing. I copy and paste it But anyway, this is just a brief introduction about how am I heading into the field of psychology round and square, re-embracing part of my Chinese cultural journey. Now, here's a little bit for you to understand also. The sphere that on the left is psyche. Psyche is the Freudian use of the German in the European use of the psyche. And many of the components are very much the same, okay, like I put here. But the Chinese instead is, think about the heart. And the heart language can be also used as conscience. And then that will be more, I can spend in my conscientological studies, a book is already written on the Amazon and also published, is the conscientological study and analysis. The first book I wrote, the 3C communication systems, also onto the Amazon and on the ebooks. And the third book is coming out. It's just conscientology. And then the fourth book is I am writing with a lot of pride, is the Pedagogy of Conscience. So you will see more of this. I will continue to create my books with images like this, because a picture tells 1,000 words, and all of you are open to critique and ask for changing or add it. Okay, it's interactive today in our world. Is no longer I'm lecturing in a hall and pontificating myself. This is part of the conscientological civilization. I am basically talking about the cyclical, the ecological movement, how we learn, how we get our knowledge, and turning knowledge into intelligence. This is my first fee I make. I just created the artificial intelligence to make it a little bigger. And also to let you understand, it's interesting, talk about the Western psyche called artificial intelligence. And the Chinese call it is the man created and man-made wisdom. Now, this become the three intelligent spheres, cultural spheres. In the old intelligent sphere, I have incorporated into the three thinking elements: reasoning skill, rational, and irrational. But it's very funny. I should make the irrational part of it with a square or elongated square, because this idea I first have adapted from the oral tradition by me using the TA, the three sets, and the voice sound like this. Just it's very common. We all like to be talk about a little bit common about, well, the reasonable to say that I would like to be not rich. I would like to be comfortable. Yeah, to be comfortable, retirement, you have to have some kind of a economical balance. That is the reason sound. And the rational, man, is that I have to be productive and earning money for my family, for the comfort of my children and my wife. The irrational is that kind of a man, maybe, again, you see the psychological impact, suffer some sort of ups and downs in life. Is that I have to get rich because people put me down when I was poor, or when I was young, I was poor. Well, many people can see the multi-millionaires and billionaires often is coming from a simple compensation. When they were young, they were down, they were discarded, they were disrespected, whatsoever. So this ecological system, the way I look at it, we all take it from the nature, from around the world, we have knowledge. But we also, to understand, I actually got this to be a better set from the last visit in the Pensacola beach. Welcome to the beach. Enjoy our surrounding. But please do not leave the blueprint in the surrounding. in a way, applying to the knowledge we take is free. From the knowledge, we gain intelligence. The only part I don't like about this area of intelligence, because intelligence, they can have a negative and vicious side when our conscience being covered by greed, by power. We create wars. People kill, people get hurt. But intelligence, when it's all benevolent, by way of reason, is the thinking agent to put everything to work with conscience. Conscience basically is a screener of good or bad. Conscience basically is the guardian to put it back to wisdom. So there is a double filtration. It verified by reason, conscience, wisdom, and then put it back to the general knowledge. So this is kind of like the guardianship about intelligence. When it comes to intelligence, we have to be a little alert. Let me give you another historical perspective about the Chinese. We all brag about, oh, we created firecrackers. But not until it got to the hands of the Mongols, the gunpowder were never used to hurt and harm. Now, again, by me saying this with my recent historical perspective, I can see many of you may come and say, wait a minute, don't tell me that you Chinese have not used gunpowder and gun. No. Today, with the AI, with all that I use every day with DeepSeek, along with Claude from Anthropic, you can verify very quickly what I say and what you think it might be wrong. Double check and double check and double check. And fear not to post. Because if you learned, I have not, it's not that you gain by your intelligence. We share the intelligence. And this is what the open learning is all about. And that's what I write about here, Conscientology. It will be a book, and the Conscientological Civilization, which I have started with the Conscientological studies. I am still searching, am I doing everything correct? Sometimes by your critique, by your comment, by your added comment, we all improve. But this is basically, if you and I take up the knowledge from the world, whatever, for 1 minute you get inspired, well, someday you can put it back to the world. Teach your children, your family, your students. If you're a coach, teach your students. Knowledge is to be shared, but a certain kind of knowledge can be used by intelligence, like the war industry today. People would like to create war just to be profitable. For me, that's obscene. For me, that is totally negative. I'm going to the next frame. Repeating. Trying to stay around all the time, or trying to embrace others, or yourself to be embraced and hug and kiss and tug by the others. Be mindful, square, because that's where you hesitate. And how would you want to go from square to back around or to triangle? But all this is the movement I have started 5 years ago during COVID. It's one form of expression, okay? And now, another one. Well, I like the background, front, back, to stimulate your visual. Is overdone, you can always skip it. One more time, the transfiguration. One more time, the tightest spot, the tighter the turn. So in any one of the turn, you can say, no, I'm heading back to where I'm at. All right. And remember, the cultural sphere, you can always have the extension. Sometimes when I'm talking about Tang Dynasty of the 600 AD in relating to issue in Elizabethan England, I have the oval just extended, talk about the conscience, like say Sir Thomas More and Confucian value. This is very flexible. Look at the color intensity. I can use it light, transparent, translucent, solid. Okay. And on my ego, super ego, I would like the real self always remains present. But that's just me. You may have a different interpretation. The system is not thought to be follow me as is doctrine or discipline. My open format is to let everyone develop your area of expression. Again, it's like a repeat. The 40 super ego, and did complement with the parents and doubt in the child. Okay. And also, I'm showing a little bit of the square and round and triangle. Just I'm trying to get you as visual. I did not say too much about the operation format of TA, and they offer you some about victim, rescuer, and the persecutor. But remember, a rescue does not mean always goody goody. You over rescue, you over pamper your children, they become less effective. So be mindful of every situation. You can use in all this is the sphere. You may think what the person is. This guy's always crying baby is a victim. This one is, maybe overdoing, but not. And the persecutor, we always know who the persecutors are. By adding the three shapes that has since been named the CD in my work, you can make oil modification. You may like a purple color. What color means favorite for different tribe? Don't forget, the purple is one of the richest color in all my year dealing. One of the lowest cost of beautiful gemstone called amethyst. Well, somehow the Greeks using amethyst is a stone to reduce alcoholic consumption or drunkenness. But the real purple historically comes in very beautifully, was delivered by the Phoenicians, which eventually become the Carthaginians. And from Nisha, they have the shell that gives them one of the beautiful color dye, which is purple, which is very rich, very royal. And then the Roman adapted. Eventually, they found it in my history with the Ceuta in the Morocco area, in the Gibraltar, in that northwest corner of Africa, in the island of Canary Islands, Canarias, they also found similar shells. But this is a different story. The color is entirely up to you. If I go to the middle of the tribal in Angola, okay, or go to the region, we speak with the Yorubas, a certain color will give them greater appeal. So nothing here is fixed. But this coming from my personal Asian Chinese background, not even that. In fact, the yellow and green is because I told you before, I have a lot of affection, endearment to the Brazilians. So the yellow and green is the color. One more time, the emphasis by adding the sizes measure, the color changing different. And here a little bit the Chinese in me, the beginning of man. This is Confucian said. The nature is good. This man, from the beginning, the nature itself is being kind. So this part of maybe my platform, I'm not afraid to take this as part of my influence in my life early on. Here the CCI shows up. I put it into, I put them in the cultural sphere, showing you 3C how it's developed and how this was developed. And by using this, the pictures, a picture tells 1,000 words, and that's where you can see in here in the Portuguese. I would say, well, the psychology round and square adaptable to the Latinos, to the South America, Latin America, the Iberia, Spain, Portugal. But I think it's okay once they understand more of the figures. But the psychology of round and square, if I would do it intuitively, I would do psicologia do povo in Portuguese for the people. Okay. Again, when I'm interacting with you, I'm not here to indoctrinate. I'm here to present to you the best way, the way I interpret how psychology, how communications can now come into the general popular area. Everybody can use in this format of communication. And it's good to have some psychological learning from your background. This is just a fair warning. This a 5-year-old runner about the digital era, the big data and the big cloud, the blockchain, the decentralization, the artificial intelligence, and the dynamic movement of the quantum algorithm. Okay, this is the big digital unknown. This is 5 years ago. To now, I am calling my time and period IT plus AI. Why am I using Itaí? Because in my growing up in Brazil, in the indigenous language, I was so dear to care to learn called the Ninkatu, on the early language in Brazil, in my area of São Paulo, by the Jesuits who created the foundation school in São Paulo. And the natives in the region is two groups called Tupi Guarani, and the most of the indigenous people called Tupinambás. And Ita also, my wife and I still have in our gemstone business, mineral business with the quartz and whatnot. Ita means stones. So to let me remind myself, we are in the Itaí period. And then the spatial web just came up to my horizon. So in the next configuration, Itaí, but I just space web, okay, we call it Itaí's web. Again, trying to remember, I always get myself remember the spheres. The new era is unknown. The new era, just what we see, but behind the black is like looking at the stars. For hundreds of thousands of years, we have never recognized there are the quote unquote the star elements that are not blinking in white but in black. So who is to know to the unknown? Okay, so this is more futuristic in what we do. One of the few last shots. And to remember the psychology round and square, and to remember it very simply, to look at the term we use, law and order. Look at the soccer field. The law gives you the limitations to play. And you can kick the ball as high as you want. I play tennis, so the ball can go to whatever height. But you play within that field where you serve, which quarter size do you use? And this is all part of a learning, because when I'm showing this image to you, it is psychologically, you have a subconscious level starting to be around the square, law and order. You come to my house, like the children play in my house, there's no really rules. You respect because you play in harmony. You come and you play, yard, you kick, you play soccer, you play football, you play softball. You be mindful not to damage, be careful. But we live in this life constantly. When there's order, there may not need law. But there are times law had to come in when the population increases, maybe our rural areas, small town become with more population coming through. So we are all moving dynamically, and that's part of the establishment of the 3 C's, the communication dynamic. You can look at into a community dynamic, and everything that I can put in round and square, law and order, and to give this emphasis to all of you. Now here, the cultural spheres is not about the sphere shape. This can be round, square, elongated, triangular, and do whatever you want. If you can say, Paul, I just developed a system much better for my Malaysian friends. The other one will come and tell me, Paulo, I have now working with these Cintalargas in the Amazons. And all the colors, all the shades, solid, opaque, translucent, transparent, you're open to use it. Again, I picked this knowledge from the field of knowledge of the unknown, and I'm putting it back to use to let you use the way you see fit. Again, the many, many good guidance and counselors in your life, be that your parents, your uncle, a good coach. I have many, but I have to put Paulo Freire here because until I learn about conscientization, until I managed to try to translate conscientization into Chinese, I would never could have discovered the wonderful resources I now engage with Wang Yangming in the 14th century China. It also just so happened Wang Yangming, who is one of the greatest scholars, who managed to create the confluence of the teachings 1,000 years before him, was Confucius, of Lao Tzu's Tao, and Buddha. And before the entry of the Tang Buddhistic values, they were the Zens. So because of Paulo Freire, because of my dear friend Osvaldo Capianci, we spent 5 weeks in the jungle in the Amazon in a town called São Gabriel de Cachoeira in 2008. Father Osvaldo had linked me in a much greater, more endearing way between Paulo Freire and Darcy Ribeiro, who is another marvelous Brazilian soul and cultural anthropologist who had the audacity to say, the rest of the world study cultural anthropology. We study the living cultural anthropology. So I will give you all in bits and pieces why my colors, using the Brazilian color, why Paulo Freire and Darcy Ribeiro, and in other kind of readings, Jorge Amado, his marvelous books, and this year I will finish my book, paying my respect and love to Brazil, in my writing, my perception of the last emperor, a gentle and kind emperor, plus his brother, his father and grandfather, the three Braganzas, and how Portuguese and Portugal give a Brazil their solid establishment and investment to the substance, to the infrastructure of Brazil, that will need to be continued. So I like to, using this as an expression, thanking Paulo Freire, thanking Father Capianci, and thanking the authors I read with Jorge Mark. You talk about Ribeiro, Jorge Amado, and many more. Okay, I'll stop this evening. I managed to have this under control just around 30 minutes. Good night to all.